Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги, уважаемые
Hello,
участники.
dear colleagues, dear participants in the Guide Forum, friends. This session deals with green energy. And before everything else, I want to introduce our speakers and our panelists. Pavel Snikkars, Deputy Minister of Energy of the Russian Federation, and who deals with energy, electricity, Vyacheslav Solomin, EN Plus Group, a company that is both a generating and consumption company, and Alexander Ishkov, Deputy Head of Directorate at Gazprom, dealing with environmental issues and introducing new technology. I'm Vsevolod Gavrilov from Sberbank of Russia.
Наш разговор, наверное, с того, что
Let us begin our talk. I would like to steal an introductory remarks from you. Well, there's sustainability objectives and something that deals with climate and goal number 13 and the need to provide clean and affordable energy for all.
Есть ли конфликт? С вашей точки зрения.
Do you believe there is a conflict here? And what can you tell at all about the current status of the dialogue between generating companies and consumers as regards the green energy? Thank you. I think you already have an answer in mind. And I believe that you are aware of the major rule of the energy market and as to how well this industry is balanced and how investment decisions into the energy sectors are implemented, particularly when it comes to renewable energy. Well, of course, this is an ongoing dialogue. And we, at the Ministry of Energy, keep an eye on these diverse opinions. Well, different opinions are there. What are the outcomes? First, well, this support program is drawing to its end, and we have some good results as regards the creation of generating capacity, and I believe our partners here will supplement my remarks by their own perspective. And also, like wind energy and solar energy, we have worked on those facilities and already have a position on that as the generating capacities, what we need to do to go onto the export market, and we believe that we need to provide some support measures for alternative energy sources, and we also have a good understanding of demand for our products since it sells well abroad. We also need to revisit our approaches to domestic support in the Russian Federation, and when it comes to the secure yields, and secure margins, we also need to look at how much we need to generate from renewable sources of energy. When it comes to unified energy rate systems, when we bring together power generated from solar energy, wind, and water, and everything else. So this is an ongoing dialogue. This is a national objective, a national task at hand, and since we are in charge of developing national policies, we are discussing them broadly using various venues, the market associations and the market council, and with consumers, energy consumers, that is. So I believe that we are trying to fine-tune the balance of this market and to grow for a stable balance. I believe that at stage 2, we will launch the second stage of the support program, the government, that is. Thank you. Thank you. Vyacheslav, you are both a generating company and a consumer. And, well, this is something that you state was your goals and objectives. How have you identified this balance? Good question.
В значительной степени сложился
A balance has been in place for a long time.
в тот момент, по сути, никто не думал про
Starting with the times when no one thought about the green energy or not. Everybody was thought about reducing production costs, generating costs. As new challenges are coming into place and new requirements on the part of consumers are in place for Rusal and others, other companies are generating a lot of their products. So we have new opportunities of revisiting our self-identification, and we believe that we want the London Metal Exchange set up their own special section for low-carbon aluminum.
С точки зрения энергетики,
When it comes to power generation, apart from hydropower plants, which are the most efficient in terms of their production costs, we
рыночных механизмов,
need to think about other incentives, market incentives for alternate power
в конце прошлого года стали первой
generation.
компанией в России, которая
Well, at last year, we became the first company that joined
энергетические сертификаты.
the system of energy certificates.
В принципе, готовит
And the Market Council
такие бумаги
is drafting
в России.
new energy certificates that would be used as securities on the market. I believe that this is driven by very solid logic. We are receiving state support and subsidies for the new energy from renewable sources. I further believe that
Они не безграничны.
the state and our consumers have limited resources to provide further support. So we probably need to draw on external funding. And people who would buy certificates are, in most cases, foreign companies.
СО2 как таковой, это не
Since
является локальным.
CO2 is not a local contaminant pollutant,
Важно, где он выбрасывается. То в целом место строительства
we
это бессмысленно.
believe that it may not make sense to draw some huge transborder lines from Siberia to Japan. Instead,
Дополнительных
we
мощностей
could provide extra funding to extra generating capacities to supersede dirty generating capacity,
тех стран, которые
so that this is funded by those countries who are interested in clean energy. Like, here's an ongoing project in Peru. It is underway. It is funded by Korea and Japan.
является
So
потребитель.
I believe that the end user should be the driver of change of your transition to clean energy. Is this correct?
заказал, поскольку мы
Well,
тоже
they're not ordering customers as it comes.
мы понимаем,
So we are working closely together with our consumers, like automotive companies. So our end users are people.
осознанность людей во всем мире возрастает.
I believe that people are getting increasingly
Вот эти потребности
conscious
передаются вот
regarding environmental matters. And this is something that goes from the from people to automotive producers, from aluminum producers to the state.
Очевидный такой общественный
Okay.
бизнес-запрос
So you
энергетику и
believe that there is a clear-cut social demand for clean energy. I would like to define this properly.
Здесь, мне кажется, нужно понимать
Let's talk about the low-carbon or carbon-free energy production.
углеродный а-ля зеленый
So
баланс.
we have a very good green balance, or like carbon-free balance. So if we make use of the methodologies used by our international colleagues, like the grams of CO2 per kilowatt of energy produced,
Создание его и основные
from day one, when this capacity was installed, all the way to its decommissioning,
сказано,
then
большими ГЭСами,
I
которые
believe that generation by the large generating plants, power plants,
вопросы эмиссии, да,
and
поглощения.
emission and consumption of CO2 by large water reservoirs, considering our climatic zones,
Не молодые, да,
and
уже
since we are talking
и они больше
about
поглощают.
old water reservoirs, and they're consuming more rather than they're emitting, and nuclear power plants are there too. So I believe that our carbon-free energy balance is 38% overall
Называем вот эти вещи, мне
of the
кажется,
installed capacity. So I believe that we have a lot of competitive advantages here. And it is very good that we have drafted a new bill on carbon certificates.
которые являются приверженцами.
So there is still some different understanding when it comes to solar generators or major nuclear power plants and hydropower stations.
Там, соответственно,
And
вводить
people are wary about whether they're going to introduce some more requirements, and we've got to shell out more than we used to.
большой объем
And
предложений,
we
указанный
believe that we need to
безуглеродной энергии, был
provide a lot of supply on the market
снижение цены.
so that we could bring the rates down, energy rates down. And we are driven by the goal of carbon-free energy, and there is a lot of demand from the end users. If this is so, we need to adapt accordingly, and we need to nudge our international colleagues and our partners to
Который мы
understanding this, to realizing this goal. Thank you. I see.
Давайте посмотрим за окно.
Okay, let's look into the window. There is 15 below, 20 below, could be 30 below next night, tomorrow night. So, do you believe that this renewable energy could assure sufficient warming
Чтобы мы с вами, извините, не замерзли в этой студии.
of the housing and of the buildings of the city so that we do not freeze to death here? Well, there is some fuel. There's some furnace fuel, something that heats water. And this is why it is warm in here. So, what is the role of traditional energy sources,
Газ,
natural gas,
который соединяет в себе там,
amongst everything else, above everything else, which is both technology, advanced in technology-wise and energy efficient?
в школе. Как ты считаешь,
Well,
кто
this question resembles me a question to a kid in school. Who's the boss in the family, dad or mom?
купить
When I want to eat, it's the mom. When I want to go to have a walk or a new bicycle, it's the dad. So,
мы завтра выведем
it's
все
hard to say that tomorrow we're going to decommission all power units that operate off traditional energy sources
надо
or
понимать,
combined energy sources. So we have some power plants and power units,
более многогранен.
and this is a very diverse and multifaceted organization.
Требования по
It depends on the climatic zone so much.
мы,
I further believe
Федерация и мир в
that
целом,
the Russian Federation and the world as a whole will
традиционные
be
источники.
tied up by traditional energy sources for a long
Это
time.
нормально, к этому надо нормально относиться.
This is normal.
Дело
This
нашей
is something you need to live with.
стратегических планов.
So we're talking about our vision and our strategy on the one hand, and on our current limitations on the other hand. Yes, you need to heat water to warm up the buildings and the housing.
Там частоту регулировать.
And you further need to properly regulate current frequencies. And you need to do a lot of other things to keep going.
Как бы
I really like what the person next to me said. As a generating company on the one hand, when people start thinking about what they would like to see at the other end,
хорошее
and
решение,
I believe that this may bring about a very good and well-balanced solution to our outstanding challenges. This is something may result in increased power consumption, but I believe that the power grid in the Russian Federation can offer a lot of generating capacity should need be.
Gazprom.
So, and you come from Gazprom, and you are a champion and the leader in natural gas market, and you have some ideas of transforming of the usages of natural gas to less carbon-intensive forms. So would like to hear from your perspective. I would like to comment on your first phrase, that there are some 14 SDGs and the climate sustainability is goal number 13. However, there are some other development goals, which is poverty, health, migration, and others. So when we're talking about energy issues and climate change, we need to realize that this is about more than just the climate. We're talking about political, economic, and other implications of sustainable development goals. Come from countries that do not have vast reserves of carbon fuels, carbon energy sources. So, when we talk about this carbon-free energy, we need to realize whether there is a conflict between this development goal and other goals. I recently read an article saying that over the past few years, over $1 trillion were invested in new renewable energy technology projects. Only 5% of that amount were spent on adaptation. And 95% were earmarked for various grants and subsidies. And what money are we talking about? 80 to 85% of those come from the public coffers. These are taxpayers' money that were taken away from healthcare budgets and education budgets and many others. They were taken out of the poverty control budgets. And whether this contributes to achieving sustainable development goals or not is an open issue.
Наверное, сейчас вот примеры понятны. Оказалось, что все страны не очень-то готовы к
It appears that countries of the world are not so much prepared for the COVID pandemic. Same goes about poverty and migration and famine and others. And whether taxpayers are in other countries are ready or not to invest their limited funds to energy development is a question beyond our agenda. Now, as for Gazprom, more than 10 years ago, we demonstrated to our international colleagues that the Russian power energy industry is the lowest carbon energy than of all, even lower than in Germany or in Japan. Not many people are saying about that, but Gazprom is the lowest carbon emitting company of all the international peers when it comes to gas flaming and gas burning at all. Also, Europe is using up a lot of Russian gas, as you may be aware. And we are talking about the CO2 footprint in Germany or another European Union. But they're achieving the lower carbon footprint by superseding coal consumption by natural gas, and gas is coming from Russia. So you mentioned low temperatures. So yesterday, the price of gas in Asian countries is $750, and it used to be less than 350. 354 in Europe yesterday. coal prices have fluctuated accordingly.
Ну, прямо скажем, давление на традиционные
And I believe that the pressure on traditional energy production, energy consumption is like this. Otherwise, natural gas would be the cheapest source of energy. So looking at the name of this panel discussion, the green energy forever, not at all. Not at all. And like my colleague said, well, there needs to be a proper balance between various energy sources, and this should hinge on opportunities for the economy, every economy in the world.
В глобальном смысле это не о климате.
So globally, this is not about climate changes.
Скажем,
Well,
углеродный
let me give you an example. The carbon footprint
мы его давно уже как бы вот
has been mentioned a few times already. Well,
2,5 раза.
milk supplies in the world are fraught with twice bigger carbon footprint than natural gas supplies.
Поэтому вот здесь
Well, and this is statistics.
вещи, о которых ну,
As
говорят.
for other generalities,
Первая цель устойчивого развития, вторая, третья, четвертая, пятая и
first
13.
SDG, second SDG, and 13th SDG should not run counter to each other. Otherwise, by investing funds in achieving one goal, we will be undermining other goals like famine, like poverty, like migration, etc. We need to use our funds in a well-balanced manner, in a rational way.
Это и загрязнение океана, которое
We
определяет.
should also be dealing with pollution of the world ocean, plastics, deforestation, and many other outstanding problems we're dealing with.
Инвестиции резко снижаются.
And,
Об этом
well,
много
the
сейчас.
investment into those areas has been depleting very rapidly. Thank you.
Look, you've underscored the idea that Pavel mentioned, so that actually a dynamic, self-adaptive energy system should include this capability of fast readjustment. So it's become cold, so we've taken some gas. So indeed, you're right, the dramatic rise of gas price in the hubs you mentioned in Europe and Southeast Asia is really explained by those seasonal factors. Pavel, how do you think? What's the potential of electrical power energy
Динамичная
to
адаптация.
create this dynamic adaptation? Is it part of some centralized policy, or is it up to the self-regulation at the regional systems level? Well, you know, I think it should be done as part of a unified policy, not even applying to electrical power energy industry. It's about an evolution that's happening in strategic leadership. Some companies go away from developing a strategy because they become obsolete by the time they have to be applied. So companies try to set midterm goals and try moving towards them. So in terms of electrical energy sector, well, we may not be the most efficient, but we have certain difficulties and challenges within the industry. Yes, the potential, we do have the potential, both in terms of improving the share of recoverable sources or substitution of obsolete capacity, optimization of reserve capacity, because the consumers are right. They're voting with their feet, and you have to understand that they'll keep doing that. You need to try and adapt to their demand.
Отпуска с крупных станций, снижая...
So maybe reverting to smaller size sources.
Сложность государственной
So
политики...
the difficulty about the government policy is that
Соответственно, убрать внутренние
based on this list of 13 SDGs, try to take away the internal conflicts among those goals and pick those that allow achieving the utmost effectiveness and efficiency. So I think the government and large consumers such as Sberbank and Gazprom will be able to find this balance. Of course, there are strategic guidelines that we look to, but as you've mentioned correctly, that the pandemic and the dynamically changing world have adjusted those guidelines, and there's no doubt that we'll need to revise our plans, both in terms of investment and regulation, to look for additional efficiencies. Thank you very much. Actually, as consumers, we see, and I'm not going to hide that, we see that the Ministry of Energy is responding quite quickly. And I'm not saying up to you. So we think, and it's good that you're doing that. But now I'd like to switch to the technology aspects. Recently, hydrogen has become some new symbol of energy, especially in the markets of Western Europe, in Southeast Asia. And I would like to ask Alexander, who's in charge of hydrogen technologies at Gazprom. Alexander, what is that all about? Why all this interest to hydrogen? Is this some wake of the failure of energy accumulators? How would you comment this effect? Well, there are several aspects. There may be a paradox in what I say, but the advent of this trend and everything to do with it, on the one hand shows, even though nobody ever says that, shows the impossibility or maybe failure of the direction that we were pinning so much hopes on. I mean, wind and solar energy. So if you do the right maths, you'll see that it will never be able to replace the traditional carbon-based energy for all sorts of reasons, both in terms of space and infrastructure and the amount of rare earth metals required for that, environmental implications. We're not saying that, ecologists are not even mentioning that millions of birds are dying because of these machines. So, 10 years ago, we were saying that this was what the future was about. And so now there's a lot of disillusionment about that. That's the reason why hydrogen has come up to the fore as a natural replacement for the carbon-based energy. And of course, hydrogen is a very efficient energy source. Even if we compare 1 kilo of hydrogen and 1 kilo of methane, then the energy capacity of hydrogen is almost 3 times as high, not in volume, but in kilos. And then, of course, it's more available, every aspect. And if we go back into history, the methane and hydrogen mixes were used in Germany when they were produced from coal, the so-called lighting gas that was used to provide lighting in European cities. So basically we're coming back to the old idea, and the prospects, especially in public transit, are quite good. What are your ambitions at Gazprom? We've been doing this for about 10 years now. I'd like to stay modest, but some 15 years ago, we proposed to our European colleagues for certain applications where there was excess excessive power produced.
Поставлять
So we were proposing to use that power to generate hydrogen. So some time has elapsed, and now it's become a mainstream trend because nobody has come up with a better way to preserve power. Of course, the batteries don't really look well in that capacity.
способом. И
So research shows that the cheapest way to conserve power is to get hydrogen from natural gas.
наверное, очевидно, да? Потому что если вы
There are lots of
получаете
aspects to it, but on the whole, it's quite obvious. If you get hydrogen without carbon trace, it's the cheapest technology. 76% of hydrogen worldwide is produced from methane. That's used in fertilizers. So you position yourselves as the future champion of the hydrogen market. Well, if this market is going to happen, and how do you think, is it going to happen? Well, unfortunately, it's not yet clear. It's a big question. Why? Because those who learn chemistry at school understand that hydrogen is a secondary source. It doesn't matter which you produce it from water, from coal. It's a secondary source. You have to spend a certain amount of energy to get another source of energy. Any secondary source is always going to be more expensive than a primary source. Let me give an example. It's Ouroboros when a snake eats its own tail. So you produce energy in wind stations, then you spend it in not the most efficient way to generate hydrogen, and then you burn hydrogen in a turbine to get the energy. So there's no way for this to be cheaper, even more sustainable. Well, nevertheless, Vyacheslav, I know that you're also looking at the hydrogen theme. What's your interest there? Yes, we've been analyzing hydrogen for a long time. We started with the premise that we have quite a lot of energy, so can we do electrolysis? So far, as my colleague rightly said, we haven't found the opportunities and the locations where we are. But this said, I believe that this market will certainly happen. For exactly the same reason that my colleagues mentioned. So the efficient way to store energy. And also I think there's a demand now for carbon-free aluminium. And I think there will be a moment in time when low carbon steel will come into demand. I understand this technology is not yet widespread, but nevertheless, some demand will happen. For ourselves, what we've found is that so far, we have been looking at the solutions to infrastructure-related challenges. So for the hydrogen energy industry to develop, we need the entire infrastructure in the downstream to be built. And we understand that one of the alloys that we produce has quite a good resilience to the hydrogen brittling. So the potential is better than that of steel. And so for ourselves, we believe that it has become possible to create the liquid hydrogen transportation infrastructure or highly pressurized hydrogen, and also distribution, local distribution systems. This is one thing. Another thing, well, perhaps it's not going to be our responsibility, but maybe we'll take part. So if you look
Куда пойдет водород?
at where the hydrogen will go, I think it's not only going to be produced from methane, but also offshore wind and in North Africa, in solar panels. So you are hinting at the 15 gigawatts of installed capacity that you have. Well, regarding the 15 gigawatts, you can't say they're idling. So we don't just burn off energy. Of course, all this energy is consumed somewhere. Now, at the current prices, and more than that, in the future hydrogen prices, to recoup the building of a new hydropower station through hydrogen, well, it does not sound realistic. You can do that for a solar power station, by the way. So maybe that adds a potential in certain regions. As to hydropower, no. The calculations don't prove that. Also, we looked at the market of electrolyzers. Again, the production capacity of hydrogen in electrolyzing, the capacity are located in China, and so they are utilized 100%. So this is going to be the bottleneck that we'll get into as the hydrogen energy industry is going to develop. Partly in the service and infrastructure segment, it's also possible that the margin is going to be higher than in hydrogen itself, just like oil services are now more lucrative than oil production itself. Yes, that's true. But still, I'd like to come back to the ideas that you mentioned a few minutes ago. So far, recoverable energy industry is associated with government support one way or the other. How do you think, how close we are to the point where this traditional recoverable energy industry is going to become competitive to the market, not requiring any active involvement by the government? Is it a close goal, or is it something that we don't understand yet? Well, thank you for the question. I think it's quite a close goal. And the reduction of the price that happened, that we found out as part of the analysis of the PNV tender, actually brought us into the understanding that the second program needs to be launched. We understand that the numbers there are much lower than the first ones, and that's why the question. We believe that in the very near future, the price is going to become much closer to the one typical of traditional energy. But again, back to the questions that you mentioned, climate, heat management, costs. So it's the question of domestic demand and the understanding of whether I want to pay more, understanding that this is this kind of energy. Even hydrogen, I'm sorry, they distinguish between green and gray ones. So, and again, you're getting into this thought, hey guys, what's that? Is it our policy to create some competitive advantages? So, remembering our Soviet past, when the beer was only distributed to the members of trade unions, as the joke went, starts seeming this way. So this logic of creating this demand, what our European colleagues are doing, enhanced information pressure on this, they generate this kind of response. So I think we just need to get a clear understanding about the potential, about the preparedness of our users. I think the prices are going to become much closer to commercial ones in the near future. My personal opinion is that the Ministry of Energy is also needs to generate an opinion like that. So my personal opinion is that the amount of such government support will just not be necessary in the near future. So you're giving us a message as financiers to keep a close eye on this market and take a look at how the capital is invested there, because the yields expected there are going to be quite lucrative. Yes, again, it's up to you as an investor to keep track of the market and the market opportunities. My personal opinion is that we need to be asking you, dear investors, where is the biggest potential? Because you've been looking about that. Do you already believe, have you already come to believe the potential?
Мне кажется,
You know, if you come to us as the government, just like a kid would go to their daddy saying, "Dad, can I do that?" I don't think this is the right approach. If we're talking about globalization and working together in a common market, then we need to try and get our own understanding, each one of us. Yes, thank you very much. As part of the energy, of course, we have some experience building a solar power station in Russia. We have experience in solar energy abroad. So I can say that the requirements to the design of such power station in Russia are comparable to those applied to the cogeneration plants or nuclear power plants. So the costs that you need to carry satisfying all the requirements in Russia are much stricter than in other countries. You know, in Japan, they just put up panels on wooden poles and nothing happens. So we even ask the Chinese, can you build them cheaper? If they have to follow our standards, they couldn't offer us a better price. So it's also a question of regulations.
Обычные стандарты
We believe that it's a question of whether the traditional standards should apply to these types of energy. So did you do it a long time ago? Yes, quite a long time ago. And that's the reason why. When we were starting to run these projects, so we got complaints from investors regarding the regulations and design standards. That's why at the government level, a whole roadmap to remove barriers was set up, and it's already been implemented. Life has changed. Let me use certain associations. One of the favorite movies about the hobbits had this phrase at the very beginning, "The life has changed." And indeed, the life has changed. There were certain problems. Excessive requirements have been removed, and I think we moved even a bit further in terms of micro-generations, for instance, referring to the example that you've given about a solar panel on a wooden pole. I think all the required regulations will be adopted in the very near future. People will start doing that, and we'll start seeing the feedback in the way of how people use that by installing solar panels or wind stations. Well, that will be a revolution. Well, it took some emotion and effort on us, including some technical constraints, but I'm hoping that we've been able to find the right balance. So, colleagues, our session is drawing to a close. So let's do a very short blitz set of questions. Alexander, I would like to say that hydrogen is considered to have 4 categories in Europe. In addition to green and gray, there are blue and orange, which just... So our goal is to understand, is just to be based on the amount of carbon used to produce a kilo of hydrogen. Vyacheslav, your basic idea. The basic idea is that the agenda that is arriving needs to be seen as opportunities for energy company, production companies. You're right, the life is changing, and our adaptation capability is the key. Pavel, I fully agree. In terms of myself, as being a Ministry of Energy official, we need to rethink perhaps a number of approaches to regulation so that these capabilities should take off, should be implemented faster than they could in the past. And the second point is that you need to hear, you need to listen, be able to hear. So the energy is an underpinning industry. We clearly understand the basic principles of its operation. So I'm hoping that the change in the regulation will help implement all the changes that are available in the world, in this country, and get the effect. Thank you, colleagues. We are wrapping up our session. And as I think it turned out to be quite productive and exciting. Indeed, the Russian energy balance is a really low energy, low carbon, and the dynamic changes that are happening both at the producer and the consumer side are offering opportunities for further transformation, taking account of the different interests of all the parties involved, of us as citizens of the country, the right to education, to healthcare, to clean energy and climate control. Thank you all very much. Thanks all our speakers, and take care.